Um, So this is being recorded for anybody who wants to watch back afterwards as well. So these three panelists that we have all taken different routes and followed slightly different passions to all help the environment within the same sector. And we're here to help you see how you can do the same. So the demand for the work is growing. So the Department for Farming and Rural Affairs predicted that the sector would grow by 20% between 2020 and 2030. Some of that is being driven by changes to legislation. So we've recently seen the tying of nature restoration to building development in the UK, for example, through biodiversity net gain. There's also growing interest in jobs in media and communications, in science communications and public engagement that are all bringing disciplines into the sector. There's also a new natural history GCSE going to be released in across the UK in the next year or two as well, which just shows that the interest from the public is growing and the concern for nature and climate is a real one. The sector is also evolving, so we're using tech more and more in different areas. So you'll see the use of things like drones with LiDAR, so we're able to predict wildlife movements, we're able to predict flooding, for example. We're also using AI for certain jobs as well. So AI is obviously a universally important tool, but I will add many of the roles, especially those that are focused on species ID, ecological surveying techniques and working directly with people and landscapes remain far less vulnerable to automation and other industries. So we see this industry as quite safe from the automation, but obviously we're still able to make use of those tools as well. And particularly people that have a keen understanding of data and tech have got a place in this industry the more that we adopt it as well. So I just want to run through quickly before I open up to the panel on what we mean by a green job for nature. So green jobs you'll see listed against people like the renewable energy sector, the sustainability sector, for example. So green jobs for nature are those that have an impact on landscape. So they're not just about planting trees or working in stunning landscapes, but that can be a part of many jobs as well. But we need scientists, storytellers, planners, education, and specialists in tech as well, just as much as we do with rangers and ecologists. So some of the ones you'll see listed on screen, I'll just run you through briefly what some of them might do. So environmental advisors make businesses help them make better decisions. That could be a business that's looking to be more sustainable. It could be a developer that's looking to build more houses. It could be a lot of things that businesses that affect nature that has specialists advising them. Conservation workers manage habitats on the ground and help with species restoration. There's some really cool reintroductions going on in the UK at the moment. So beavers are one of the latest ones, but we've recently had white-tailed sea eagles being released on the Isle of Wight here too. Data and mapping analysts, so they'll be using drones and geographical information systems to track changes in the landscape. Ecologists study how living things interact and are involved in planning decisions. So most buildings in England certainly have to have an ecologist tied to them to help them build that in a way that's not going to cause harm, but now actually improve nature. Environmental educators, so any child that's been on a school trip to a nature reserve may well have met an environmental educator, and one of those is on our panel today as well. Forestry and arboriculture both work with trees, but both do very different things with trees as well. So they help protect, enhance. We've got some really cool works going on with trees to help speed parts of them up in terms of their aging. So they're really good for bats and other species such as stag beetles. Media and comms, so a lot of the Wildlife Trust, the National Trust, the RSPB, for example, rely on people that are really good at media and comms and able to help membership come to them in order to help people understand how they can behave when out in nature to avoid disturbance of wildlife. Policy and law specialists, we have, without getting political, but we have policy and legislation that's passing through parliaments in all of the nations at the moment that will have big impacts on our wildlife. I've worked in the sector for 15 to 20 years, but I'm not an expert in policy or law. But right now you are seeing the real benefit of people who are legal experts in being able to argue to politicians why the decisions they're making are not necessarily the best ones. Project managers, and again, we've got one of those within the panel as well, bringing other skills with them. Projects and how to manage them is the right way within any industry. So there's lots of movement around if you're a project manager. And researchers, because everything that I've just mentioned requires really strong research to base it on. The risk of harming a species and the opportunity to bring them back is based on really strong scientific research. And so there's many lab hours spent by lots of people within the sector and helping the rest of the workforce to make the right decisions and do the right things. Some of those roles that I've mentioned are outdoors, others are desk-based or creative, some are both. Some are practical, some are scientific, and some are strategic. But that is the key. Whatever your child's strengths or passions, there's a green job that fits you. And the routes in are just as varied. So typically the sector has been seen as one that only needs degrees. That's not the truth. Some roles still require degrees. Many a degree would be a step too far for them. And there's lots of different styles of learning, from A levels to college to traineeships to apprenticeships, and the traditional degree as well. So there's many routes to go in. So there's no one way to get started. So I think I've talked myself out, and I am now going to hand over and stop sharing my screen and hand over to my colleague, Annie.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Brian, and welcome everyone to tonight's event. Great to see that you're interested as parents or carers or career advisors or even young people yourselves in a green jobs for nature. And Brian's just brilliantly covered the wealth of green jobs for nature. I think often when people think green jobs for nature, you think, oh, I must need to wear welly boots and work outside in all weathers. But there really is such a range of different green jobs. I am one of those people that Brian mentioned that works in policy and spend, well, this morning speaking to the Cabinet Secretary about policy in Scotland. So a real variety, and I'm delighted to be joined tonight by 3 panellists that will tell you a bit about what they do and their own career journey and share their top tips as to how they got into a green job. So firstly, we've got Ashleigh Kitchiner, Grace O'Day and Chris Wilkins. So I'm going to pass over to Ashleigh to start with because you're first on my screen. Can you tell me, just for a couple of minutes, a little bit about you and what you do?
Absolutely, thank you, Annie. So as Annie has said, my name's Ashleigh. My role on the advertisement for this webinar was that I was a marine mammal specialist. My job has since changed, so I now work as a consent manager for a developer, for a transmission operator. It all falls into the same sort of envelope, or the skills are quite similar. So my speciality is marine mammals, and I hope to feed into my new role with that. But I would say my journey, I went to university. I wasn't quite sure what I enjoyed. I did a degree in biology. I didn't specifically do a degree in marine biology, so I often coin myself as a bit of a fraud in the marine biology world. But I continued with my degree in biology. But what I really enjoyed about doing such a broad program was that I was able to choose different modules and sort of make the degree my own. And within doing that, I learned that I absolutely loved ecology, animal behaviour, conservation. And up to that point, I had no idea that you could have well-paid jobs in the sector. It was a bit of a mystery to me, this space. And I learned a lot about that during my degree. I decided to stay on to do a master's where I specified a little bit more. I went into marine mammals and then did internships, saw my first dolphin, and I was like, right, that's it. I know what I'm going to do now. And it was just like a light bulb moment, and I kind of thought, right, how do I go about this? But I have to say, my family throughout that journey had no idea what ecology was, had no idea what the environmental sector was. They just thought I'd end up not having any money, not being able to own my own home, all those types of sort of stereotypes that came with it. But that is far from the truth. So yeah, now I work for large developers. I've worked a lot offshore. I've worked as guiding. I've been to the Antarctic, Arctic, delivered lectures on marine mammals. And yeah, that's pretty much how I am where I am today. I've probably rambled on a lot. So Annie, I don't know if you want to choose the next person or...
Yeah, I'll move across to Grace, if that's okay. Thank you, Ashleigh.
Hi, I'm Grace. I work as a conservation education host at the Oceanarium in Bournemouth. I went through college and then uni, and then work experience and volunteering to get where I am today. It's been a rocky journey, but very happy where I am now, but happy to go into that at some point. My main roles are I teach school groups about conservation and animal welfare. I do 5 public talks a day about animals, and yeah, I love it.
Thanks, Grace. That's brilliant. And Chris.
Thank you. Just unmute myself. Hi, I'm Chris. So I had an odd path into industry. I currently work as a site supervisor for a habitat management company, which is, it sounds, I'm not really sure we manage the habitats. We create some, we try and restore some others. So an average day could be anything from planting trees or damming up rivers and peatlands or re-meandering old drainage ditches to create wetlands. But I had no idea you could do any of that as a job when I was younger. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I left school. I ended up just going into the buildings, into construction, and then later on to oil rigs. And I did that for 10 years. And it wasn't until after COVID that I thought, it's not really what I want to be doing. What do I enjoy doing? I want to be outside. I want to be in the trees. And I was fortunate enough, I guess, to live near Brian, who was a tutor at the local land college, and I enrolled on a City and Guilds A-level course in wildlife ecology and conservation. And I graduated a few years ago, and then I've been in sort of a practical outdoor role ever since.
Perfect. Thank you to all three of you. We will be able to have any questions from the people that are joining tonight. There's a Q&A box at the bottom, which has got a little question mark. So you can add any questions that you have there, or there's also a chat function, which is like little speech bubbles. So you can add any comments and questions there as we go through the panel discussion. Just want to pick up on something that I think you all referred to, that when you were starting off, you didn't know that these jobs existed, and probably neither did your parents, and maybe not even your teachers and careers advisors. Do you think that is changing? And what can be done to help it change as well? And I'm going to go to Ashleigh first.
Yeah, so for me, I really think it's changing in the marine space, particularly marine mammals. I get so many messages on LinkedIn now from people with asking for advice, but kind of they know what they're asking for. You know, that, you know, I've heard of this role, what will allow me to get into that role? I've heard of this. So it, to me, it really has changed. People are, the role titles and things like that are out there a bit more. People know what the definition is, what they mean, what the skills required are. I personally think it's about representation. I think it's about having people active on platforms that are talking about their role. You know, it could be a day in the life of video, or sort of having that continuity throughout someone's career. I think people like to follow that and see, oh, they've done that, maybe I should do that. How did they do that? And sort of connect the dots. So that for me is important. Mentorship is important. Reaching out to people is really, really important. I'm mentor-less at the moment. I don't have one, and I am currently looking for one. I had one for a while, and they were very, very useful, mainly for confidence building. I'd say technical skills, yeah, important. But for me, my mentor really helped with confidence, knowing what I should expect from my employer and knowing what I should ask for, not just, you know, feeling grateful for the position and all that stuff. It's about, well, they've chose me for a reason, and having the confidence to ask for certain things in return. So for me, representation and mentorship are really important.
Yeah, and I think that's something we're trying to address with the Green Jobs for Nature project, is trying to see yourself out there, because I think, you know, traditionally we're not particularly diverse as a profession, and that's something that is very much changing. And linked to that, you know, there are some challenges for people, depending potentially on, you know, economic backgrounds or where they are located, or many other challenges as well. So I'm going to throw it open to Grace and then Chris on the same thing. Any challenges that you faced? I think Ashley mentioned being with low pay as well, and that's something that is often thrown out. So whether you've got any thoughts on that or any other challenges you faced coming into the sector.
Yeah, so there's definitely challenges, but again, if it's a job and a career you're interested in, that shouldn't stop you. I come from a neurodiverse background. I've got a disability called cerebral palsy. That affects my short-term memory, so I do have short-term memory loss. And I was actually told at college I would never get a job in an animal-based career. To date, I've worked on 3 farms. I've worked at the aquarium. You know, I'm doing it, and I want to advocate that, you know, if someone tells you don't do it, don't listen. Basically, my parents have supported me the whole way. And so yeah, it wasn't until I got to around 16, 17 that I was told I couldn't do it. So having that whole 16 years believing I could, I just sort of put it to one side. You know, it didn't mean anything, but some people might have that told to them a bit younger and therefore might be influenced to not take up a career in a green field. And I just want to say, yeah, don't take it as gospel.
Thank you so much, Grace. Just incredibly inspiring, and that you've stuck at it and had that determination to get where you want to go. And Grace has written an incredibly inspiring blog on the Green Jobs for Nature website that we can add a link in the chat as well, because there's so many valuable lessons that I think, you know, we can all take away. But also, I think Grace typifies so well that the fact, actually set your mind to anything and you can achieve anything that you want. Chris, we'll keep going on the negatives, and then we'll move to some of the more positives of getting into the sector. But I think it is useful to be honest about some of the challenges. So Chris, any challenges I think you said that you didn't have a degree and that you got into the sector after A levels, is that correct?
Sort of. I retrained and did an level course in my 30s. So the hardest thing for me, aside from the fact, you know, growing up not knowing there were jobs, unless you saw a David Attenborough documentary or maybe Country File, you didn't know that these people were out there doing these things. But I think that the pay is not great, certainly not initially, and coming in later in life with mortgage and bills is incredibly tricky to juggle. And the fact that there's always an expectation that you will have volunteered for free for a year or more to try and get your foot in the door, which I think is obviously a huge barrier for people, particularly if they're trying to change careers.
Yeah, and again, I think that is changing. We're seeing a huge number of people, I think partly prompted by COVID, changing careers and coming into the sector, and those opportunities are becoming more and more available, as well as the different routes into the sector. So yeah, thank you, Brian, for posting Grace's blog. It is super inspiring. And Grace, there's a question in the chat for you, we can come back to. So for the young people and for the parents in the call, helping to advise the young people, what can you suggest they can do out with school and college to help gain their skills and experience? I think we're so focused on the school journey and then college, but what can young people be doing aside from that? Chris, I'm going to come for you first.
I suppose I was quite, in a way, I always really enjoyed sort of the Cubs and the Scouts route. That was the only engagement with the outdoors I think a lot of people got growing up. And I think forest schools are amazing nowadays, maybe for the sort of younger end of things. But I think if you can get out, I know I've just slated it, but if you're in a position where you're not working, if you can go and volunteer or make your face known at some of the local nature reserves, and the sort of outdoor spaces, then I think that does really give you a leg up later on if you're a known face.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Grace, any thoughts that you had in terms of those sort of out of school experiences?
The ones that encourage me. Yeah, so I'd say trips, always, you know, yeah, just being outdoors, all the outdoorsy activities, all the learning about animals in any way I could. Um, yeah, all the non-mainstream sort of lessons.
Yeah, and I've certainly heard from lots of consultancies and employers, partly working in Scotland, that if they have people that have had an outdoorsy background and are keen on being in the outdoors, can read a map, just gives them as employers the confidence that they will be fine going in the outdoors, will kind of know what clothing, outdoor weather conditions to be aware of. So I think some of those youth groups can be really useful for that. And just getting involved with local wildlife groups as well. Ashleigh, have you got anything from a marine perspective to encourage people to get involved in?
Yeah, mine's probably a little bit different. I do a presentation on sort of life as a marine biologist, deliver it to schools sometimes. And to do that, I kind of picked away at what actually inspired me to be in this role and what inspired me to work in this sector. And it's actually a lot of telly. There's a lot of TV when I was younger. So Lion King really inspired me about animals, Free Willy, Frozen Planet, everything like that. It really, really inspired me and made me want to go to these places and see the animals, and also sort of gave me, I'd say, compassion for the animals as well, and really wanted to advocate for them. Um, so as much as getting outside is important, I think also, sharing these documentaries and things like that with children. I know sometimes it can be a bit scary when there's animals fighting and killing killing other animals. But it is one of the things that really, really inspired me. I think moving on into sort of high school, I probably learned most about the outdoors and the careers volunteering with a local wildlife trust than I did at school. So I don't think I would be here if I didn't volunteer with a local wildlife trust. There were just so many people that were there that said, you can work as this, you can do this, and you can do this. And it was like this whole world opened that I didn't know about. And as I mentioned, my family didn't know about either. So it was really, really useful to have that. And yeah, just reaching out to people and find, I think you say, Annie, about youth groups and things like that, I think that's really important, because I think finding your voice as a young person is quite intimidating. So joining youth groups and gaining confidence is really important as well.
Perfect, thank you all. And on the Green Jobs for Nature website, we've got 220 profiles written by some of the panelists here, in fact, but they're all written by people that are actually in the sector and cover, what the job involves, how they got into the sector, so what qualifications they have, the challenges and what they like about the job as well, and again their career tips. So obviously we've got a brilliant panel today of 3 people, but you can go and look on the Green Jobs for Nature website and find much more stories, because again, I work in the sector and have worked in the sector since my early 20s, and I'm still finding out about, I didn't know you could go and do that. And it's brilliant just seeing, because when I started, that diversity of jobs didn't exist. There were much more a narrowed focus of roles available. So yeah, we can certainly share that. I just want to drill down a little bit more into what's a typical day like for you, because you've got 3 quite contrasting jobs here. What's a typical day like? Chris, can I come to you first?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's a big question. My job really is very varied. And it can range from, so some of the projects I've worked on, I was down in Dorset. We were lucky enough to work on the Dorset Peat Partnership. So it was a project that involved the National Trust, the RSPB, Forestry England, lots of different landowners all across Dorset with the aim of restoring peatland across the entire county. So that was out in wellies or waders, building dams, doing a much worse job than beavers could have done, but basically blocking up old waterways and drainage ditches from old agriculture to try and flood these peatlands that were drying out and turning into heath. So a lot of wading around. I mean, we're doing that in January and February, so it was very cold. The sort of rivulets were starting to freeze. But then in the summer, you know, you might be out with a strimmer, you might be planting trees, cutting back bramble and working in woodland, maybe thinning out coppice, that kind of thing. So I'm really lucky that I get to be doing very practical things, playing with tools out in the British countryside. So yeah,
So dependent on the weather, isn't it, Chris? Because I started off as a plant ecologist, and I remember I was on pretty much on the top of the Cairngorms with horizontal hail and blowing what we call in Scotland an absolutely hoolie, so essentially a gale, and thinking, you know, it's a good job I get paid to do this, but equally on some Scottish islands in glorious sunshine, sitting amongst all the wildflowers and going, I get paid to do this. How amazing. So I think with any of the outdoor roles, the weather in the UK does play such a big determinant in the enjoyment of the role, doesn't it?
Exactly. But as long as you've got a decent raincoat or some sunscreen, I think you can pretty much deal with most things.
Yeah, and skin is waterproof at the end of the day. Grace, at the aquarium, what's a typical day like for you? I think you mentioned you do 4 talks a day. That must be quite tiring.
Yeah, I do up to 5 talks a day. Um, so yeah, I start off my day. Firstly, cleaning is such a priority. So clean the whole building, wipe the windows. But the main part of my job is to talk. I do up to 5 talks a day. So I do otters, penguins, sharks, and reef fish, then back to otters and back to penguins. So I what in those talks I sort of say, some fun facts about the species in there, and then I sort of highlight the conservation barriers they are facing. But then what's really important is I leave the talk on a positive note, saying how we can help. It's no good ending on doom and gloom, because that's been proven not to make people want to help. So if you give them some sort of thing to aspire to help with, it's more of a positive impact. And then between talks, I'll do a education table where I have artifacts of coral or shark teeth or things like that where people can touch, because touch is a really important way of learning, especially for kids. And then between that, I do a beach clean every day. So I'm based at Bournemouth, right on the beach, on the seafront, and it's now the height of summer, and it's very important to keep the beach clean so it doesn't end up in the ocean.
Well, it sounds like a very busy day, Grace, between all those talks and a beach clean, but very much important of public awareness. And I'd imagine out on the beach, you probably get involved in lots of conversations with members of the public as well. And I like the point you raised about, focusing on the little actions that everyone can do, because eco-anxiety is such an issue with young people. And I think the message getting across is that, sometimes one person might not make a difference, but collectively, if everyone takes small steps, it can make a huge difference. So yeah, that's really inspiring. Ashleigh, I know you've just changed roles from having your own consultancy to working for a industry now, but choose either your last role or your new role, what does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, my last role was maybe a bit more exciting. So I was working for myself for 2 years, and I was working offshore a lot. So in the summer, a typical day would be going to an offshore a rig installation or a vessel, working on a project that was maybe undergoing offshore construction, so building wind turbines, wind farms, that we've got all the marine renewable projects that are going on at the moment. And I would be on board to protect and conserve marine mammals. So my main focus would be making sure that the construction was within certain parameters. There wasn't marine noise that exceeded certain limits, because that has a real big impact on marine mammals. That would be a summer day. A winter day, I would go down to Antarctica and work down there as an expedition guide. So I'd deliver lectures on marine mammals, drive people around on a rib around the ice, which is pretty fun, and also do kayaking and mountaineering and that type of thing. As I say, I've changed now to not be as sort of as out in the outdoors. So now it's more desk-based, but I still get to do boat visits. So I think I've got boats in the water on my project in November, so I'll go during the start of the project and sort of run through everything with them. So yeah, slightly different, slightly variant, but I have been desk-based for, I think it was a year and 9 months. Then went back to sea for 2 years. Now I'm desk-based. I'm not sure how long it'll last this time around, but we'll see. So just, I think it's good to be aware that you can transition at any time.
Yeah, and again, I think that's different than it used to be as well, Ashleigh. It used to be you started working with one organisation and that's where you stayed pretty much till retirement. But you know, people swap roles all the time. The opportunities out there, and sometimes it is a case of being in the right place at the right time, and you can generate those opportunities by being out there and making those all important networks. And certainly renewables in Scotland is a huge growth industry, and there are lots of opportunities appearing. You know, even for communication roles, some of the sustainability elements, lots of different roles within that. I've got some questions coming in the chat and lots of comments. I'll ask the panelists one more question, and then we'll come to some of the questions in the chat. So please add any more questions that you've got in the chat. I'm loving seeing all the comments in there. What do you see the future of this sector being? And is there long-term job security? We hear at the moment all about AI and tech. Is that going to take over the jobs, or is it going to supplement it? I'm going to go to Chris first. He's already come off mute. He's obviously dying to answer that.
Just in case. I think supplement is the short answer. I don't think we're in a position where you can automate having, well, you know, from the practical point of view, but I even think the planning, but they're always going to need someone in waders or wellies with a spade to plant trees or to plug up rivers. So, and the focus and the shift of people's mentality and government policy towards biodiversity, net gain, I think there's a huge focus on that now. So I think it's probably a burgeoning industry rather than a waning one.
That's positive to hear. Grace, what are your thoughts? What's the future looking like?
So I think now more than ever, education is key. So AI can help with education. I think, you know, now we teach from home quite a lot, especially with children with special educational needs. Apps can be developed to help understand like environmental importance and animal welfare. So I do think technology can help. I think it's important also to see things in the flesh and to hear talks in the flesh. So I do think my role is important as that's how people learn, from hearing someone talk and seeing what's in front of them.
Yeah, no, definitely, Grace. Ashleigh, what are your thoughts from both your last job and your newly started job?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So personally, I think this role is here for a very long time, particularly for me. So I'm working on a big project of subsea cables. So basically, it's then called the National Grid. What is it? The Big Grid Upgrade. So electrifying the UK and connecting wind farms. And I think this job is going to be here for a long time. The project that I'm on, I'm working, 9 to 5, 5 days a week now, and it's not even going to start construction until 2030. So there's quite a lot behind the scenes going on a lot of these projects. And I think that ecologists, consultancies that we work with, we've got them on for a very long time as well. In terms of AI, I think that for my position offshore, it might make that redundant when I was offshore, only because I have worked with a company where they are trying to get unmanned vessels that conduct surveys offshore, and that's to increase safety, so people aren't at sea, that kind of thing. I think right now they have a skeleton crew on board, but the idea is that nobody is on board and the vessels run the survey, and then there's a hub where everybody is stationed. But then my position when I worked offshore would still be in that hub. So it would just change. So instead of working at sea, you would travel to a hub and observe from there. There is AI being used to collect data on marine mammals at sea, but there are so many variables like fog. It can't see in fog, rain, or the waves are at a certain height. There are some big limitations on it at the moment. But I think that my personal opinion is we should work with it. And I think the jobs might shift and change, but I don't think the jobs will go. I think that they just might change in certain ways and involve different aspects of the same role. Yeah, I don't think it's something we should be scared of.
Yeah, and I think actually it's a really exciting time as well in the sector. We've had some talks on the use of eDNA and how that's being used, but you still need someone to process and to understand all that data. So yeah, the use of drones in ecology, tracking deer in wooded landscapes and things like that, or invasive species in areas that people can't easily get to. So I think it's a really exciting time in ecology because there's so much technology coming in, but it's very much complementing at the moment. So I think I think lots of exciting things. Actually, there's a question in the chat from Tracy. What do you think are the main skills gained from your last role? The huge variety of things that you undertook.
Yeah, so communication. So being able to communicate only the things that you need to certain people is very important. So, for example, if I'm offshore and they have gone against the guidelines, something's happened, that's called a non-compliance. Knowing who to communicate that to, knowing how to communicate that, and being factual about it as opposed to, he said, she said, this happened. I think good communication skills and being, as I say, quite factual with those communication skills was something that I've learnt and I use every day. I don't need to tell somebody all of this. I just need to tell them that snippet, which is quite a good skill. And then I would say, so being offshore is definitely being flexible. Things change like that. They could call you and say, right, we'll be surveying in 5 hours. Please make sure you're ready. And then you'll get a call in half an hour. We're on site, we're surveying now. So just going with the flow and being flexible is really important. And yeah, I think being offshore is male dominated. So having a sort of bit of I'd say building a bit of confidence to be able to take space in those situations is important. You know, if you've got a sort of client rep with 20 years of experience, a party chief, all these roles, and they're all sitting on a table, and you say, right, we need to stick to these guidelines and these are the rules, and then somebody says, well, we're not doing that. Understanding that you just need to go, well, if you don't do that, then I'll have to report it, but you carry on doing whatever you want to do, but just so you know the consequences. So I think not getting involved or not sort of engaging in those conversations is a good skill as well. Not rising to it, just being calm, collected, is really important as well. And as I say, like standing in your confidence in your role is important.
Yeah, I think often we so focus on the kind of technical skills that you learn through, you know, your college, your school, your college courses or your degree, and often forget about the sort of transferable soft skills, the ability to communicate, which I think for the majority of roles in ecology is so important, whether that's verbal communication or communicating by reports, presentations, or writing blogs. I think the more areas of communication, the better, really. I've just pasted a couple of links in the chat to the job profiles. As I say, there's, I think, 220 different job profiles on the site now. So you can explore, you can filter by types of job or by country if you want to look at jobs in a particular country. And many of the people that have submitted the job profiles have also provided their social media accounts, and I think are often happy to provide their advice as well. And there's lots of free resources, because I noticed there was a comment from a careers advisor. I'm just going to scroll up. Yeah, from Ray, particular career resources, materials, packs we could access to promote careers in the environmental sector. Work with adults and run webinars on all sorts of career topics. So on that link to resources, there's lots of different resources there that will hopefully be useful to you. Brian, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes. Can I ask a question of the panel first? Is that all right?
Yes, go for it. You've been quiet for too long, Brian.
Yeah, sorry. So just because you've all come through quite different routes and at quite different times in your life, as well, I just for anybody who's watching and maybe looking to come to the sector themselves, or looking for obviously a child or a dependent, to go through the same thing, what sort of things do you think are important to look for when you're choosing the educational step for you, like your route? What in hindsight do you think are the important things to focus on? Does anybody want to go first? I realize I've just sprung that on you. Ashleigh.
I'll go, yeah. So this is maybe a bit later, but part of the advice that I give now to people choosing a master's or even your sort of bachelor's thesis or dissertation. So in the third year of university, most degrees you undergo a dissertation or thesis. This is quite a big substantial project that you'll do at the end of your degree, and then in a master's you do the same. My biggest advice is choose the supervisor above the project. The project will be inspiring, and it will, whatever you do, it will be interesting. But I think having the right supervisor is very, very important. I know somebody who was in a youth action group. She then said, what do I do next? I want to do a master's, but I want to work in ecology. So we had a little discussion. She decided to go for a master's. She then, I said, choose the supervisor, not the project. And she messaged me having finished, and she said she was so grateful for that. All of the people on her course were really struggling with their supervisors, and she said that she found it a breeze, because she had, the sort of criteria was make sure that you get on, make sure that conversation flows, and you might not first meeting, but just make sure that you do meet them and you've got a sort of good energy. Supervisors can be anybody in academia, I'm sure, very, very stressed, lots of things going on, other projects going on. So making sure that they've got the time, they're organised, they can speak to you and they make time for you is important. And she said that really, really made a difference to her. So that would be my one sort of piece of advice, that later end of the journey, I'd say.
Chris, you're unmuted.
I am. So I remember time and again when I was on your course, actually, you would have arranged speakers to come in and talk to us, and it would often be people that had gone to university who came and were impressed with the level of practicality that the course you ran offered. And actually, if you want to go into a practical role and you want to be hands-on, perhaps a degree isn't always necessary, because you end up doing a lot of the theory, a lot of the study side of things. But actually, if you want to be outside doing estate skills, the fencing, the gates, the hedge laying, the dry stone walling, there are probably courses that you'll enjoy a lot more and are readily available. And then if you do want to go to the university, there are now apprenticeships, like the forestry apprenticeship, which is again mostly practical with blocks of study leave. So you still end up with a degree at the end of it, but it's not day in, day out university. So I think really find a course that you'll enjoy and that you'll see through to the end, rather than just thinking you have to go and get a master's because that's what people want.
It's a great show, Chris. Is get what you need, and look at what that might be first. Grace.
I would say for me, again, I don't know if this is another neurodiverse trait that I've not yet been diagnosed with, but if there's a topic you find it so fixating, just like go down that route or explore that route at least. My topic was welfare. So every assignment at uni that I had, I'd always look at the welfare angle, because that was just something I was so interested in. So if there is some sort of specific interest you have, don't close things off, but follow your passion, I would say, and that's what I did.
That's a really good way of looking at it. So focus everything through a particular lens you're interested in, and make it interesting. Thank you. That was all really, really good. I'm not teaching anymore, Chris. That was a great plug for my course, but sadly, there are alternatives out there. I'm just going to share my screen for the final part of the webinar. But thank you very much to the panelists, and thank you, Annie, for taking that and mastering it as you always do these times as well. So I'm just going to put the website address up there. So Green Jobs for Nature, it is a campaign that's run by the Chartered Institute for Ecology and Environmental Management, but it has a host of information on there that's usable for anybody from really the age of 10 up until career changes. It's one of the few websites that is accessible and has a level of information for everybody that's on there. So what can you do next if you're interested in joining the career? So we've heard some amazing stories tonight, all different jobs, different careers, all working towards the same aim of a healthier planet, a better environment and stronger communities. Yes, Ashleigh.
Sorry to interrupt, I can't see your screen share.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I pressed too. No, thank you. I pressed too many buttons and it did feel like I was pressing too much, and it turned out to be true. Is that better?
Yeah, that's up. Thank you, Brian.
Lovely. Okay, so there is the web address from Green Jobs for Nature that I was banging on about without a shared screen. Yes, that makes more sense in this context. So as Annie said, there are a multitude of resources on there, and they are increasing as well. So the pixelated videos in the middle are better quality on YouTube. I promise you, they're not as blurry as that. We have got a career ladder for every country, so that gives kind of a central route that people can look at the different options that are available. There are different routes into the sector than what you see there as well. Chris came via a different career entirely. Some people with social science degrees, for example, psychology, media and marketing even, you know, will come into the sector. Chris mentioned forestry. That's obviously one that we don't, you know, have on our apprenticeships website, which I think is lacking, and perhaps we should add that, because obviously forestry apprenticeship will be entirely relevant to roles in the sector as well. As Annie said, over 200 job profiles. They are filterable, if filterable is a word, by job title and country. And what you'll see on there, the aim is to show you that there isn't one best route into the sector. There are many, and that often either suits the role or the person, because you will find a team with many people doing the same role, but have all come there from a different direction. And really that's the key, is to find the one that works for you. The videos in the middle, we are adding to those. We've had a 360-degree one shot on Monday in London, so that will be available in virtual reality at some point soon as well. So you'll see the updates added to the site as we go. There is also a quiz. Now, I will temper some disappointment with this, as there are currently some maintenance going on with that quiz, and it should be back up next week. But it is really useful and actually quite fun for people of any age. I spent my whole career as a conservation worker, but it told me I should have been an ecologist. So regrets from my point of view. But it is a good guide for others to give you a good sense of, we're not looking at academic attainment on here. We're looking at what people are interested in, and it guides you to a role that might fit you based on that as well. So I take a look at the different routes into the green careers and the different roles. Be aware that not all of them require a university degree. So somebody just emailed me earlier who's on a degree and asked if they should do a master's. I have my opinion on questions that I'm asked like that, depending on the person and the course. But what I would always say is the unbiased opinion is have a look at the job roles themselves. And if the job roles ask for a master's, then that could be the right thing to do. And if they don't, then perhaps gaining a year in experience in the sector by going out and getting a job is a better thing for you. So regardless of opinion, the job descriptions and the person specifications will always tell the truth about what the career needs. So do look at those in order to guide you down the best fit road for that. If your child or you indeed want to look at getting involved now, so local volunteering can be a good way of doing it. As Chris said, it's not, you know, it's not the best side of the industry necessarily, that perhaps experience is something that's relied on too much. But when you're young and there's more opportunities to volunteer, then that can be an option for you to do it. And indeed, there are more flexible opportunities for people with different commitments as well. So there's now remote opportunities to volunteer. And for youths as well, there's things like Youth Council, the Woodland Trust are looking at volunteers at the moment to work with them on that. And they provide some finances to pay for expenses and for some skills on the way through as well. So you'll see a lot of schemes popping up advertising those kind of things as well. But remember, if you are advising other people, you don't have to feel like you're an expert in this field. This recording and others will be available afterwards as well. You don't have to have all the answers, and I'll put the email address up at the end if you want to ask us. The panelists have been kind enough to put their LinkedIn addresses up as well, and I can tell you that them, just like most people in the sector, are very generous with their time, and will answer any questions that you might have about their particular route too. We're just being open to the conversation with people, showing curiosity and sharing resources that we have with them will be enough. We're more than happy to provide you with more resources. And if you want to see anything in particular from future panels, we can show you. But just before we wrap up, I want to go to this town, which is unfortunately an AI piece of art. And the longer you stare at it, the more horrifying things get, like this person's face appearing out of some play equipment. But I will draw you away from that and talk about your town and your community in 5, 10 or 20 years time and what it needs. It's going to need somebody to restore the wetlands or protect the coastline and look after them and maintain them. It's going to need people to lead rewilding projects and tell the public about them and to teach children about ecosystems. And it's still going to need people who can influence green policies and politicians, advise businesses and inspire behaviour change, whether that's people picking up more litter, sticking to the path, or giving to their local wildlife charity, which helps them. So they aren't just future problems though, they're not just future roles. Those roles exist now and they're growing. And with some encouragement, people can be influenced to look in the way of this career and see it has a place for them, even though they might have heard and have some preconceptions that it's not. So I will move on to the next slide, which has got a link to the email on. But just to wrap up, I want to thank, on behalf of myself and Annie, our panel of Grace, Chris and Ashleigh. Thank you so much for your input tonight and for all you do for helping people in the sector as well. For everybody listening, please check out the resources in Green Jobs for Nature after the call, greenjobsfornature.org, and don't hesitate to reach out to us if you need any more help or advice answering. So I'm wrapping up 3 minutes before it ends, which is excellent. If there's any questions in the chat, there is not, which is great. I will say one more thing is that the apprenticeship page that I shared has all the up-to-date apprenticeships on it, but what it doesn't contain is the information that for England, we are currently developing a level 4 apprenticeship as an assistant ecologist, which should be live by May next year. The plan is to increase apprenticeships in other countries, so Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland as well. But these things take time. So just be aware that obviously the one for England is on its way and the others are following. So thank you very much to the panel. Thank you everybody for joining us and enjoy your evening.
Thanks all, and thanks to the panel.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a pleasure to be asked to do this and give my advice. So yeah, good luck and thank you.
Thank you, Grace. We'll speak to you soon.